right. My name is Chastity Richmond. I am a senior advisor in the Student Life Office, and I also work with our financial literacy committee here at Northeast Lakeview College. I welcome all of you guys to this event. A couple things that I need to remind you about today. We have some rules of engagement. We've posted them in the chat box multiple times, but I'm going to go ahead and read them again for you here very quickly. Rules of engagement. 1, please stay muted during the duration of this presentation. 2, if you have questions, please put your questions in the chat box and Mr. Jacob will address them at the end of the presentation or while in session. That will be at his discretion. 3, there will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation, so feel free to participate or ask a question. And 4, we need your assistance. We need you to not only RSVP, but we need you to complete the post survey that we have today in Alamo Experience. This post survey will be emailed to you today. So please expect that shortly after this event is over. At this time, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jacob. I did want to mention one more thing before I turn it over to him. We have Miss Joy here as well as Miss Magda Garza. They also serve on our financial literacy committee as well. So I want to make sure that you guys acknowledge our faculty and staff members that work with this important initiative here at NLC along with myself. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Jacob.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Chastity said, my name is Jacob Cavazos. It's a mouthful of a title, but I'll give it to you anyway. But so I'm Senior Vice President of Community Reinvestment at Broadway Bank. And basically what that means is I'm responsible for everything from our philanthropic giving to our community services that we provide, to making sure that our lending is done equitably across all the areas that we serve. So it's a rewarding job. It's a fun job. I've worked in banking about 15 years now, from San Antonio, graduated from UTSA, stayed here for school. And let's see, I was at Frost Bank for a time doing this kind of work, and now at Broadway managing the programs. And so it's extremely rewarding. But a lot of what I have done historically in the community reinvestment space is financial education, and really it's financial education at all levels. I mean, everything. I kid you not, everything from kindergarten to senior citizens. I would joke and say tinkle to wrinkle is kind of what the financial literacy that we would participate in. And really, I mean, I joke about that, but it's really because it's important at all levels. I mean, it doesn't really matter how old we are. You're never too young to learn about money and managing money, and you're never really too old to learn about it either. And so probably a decade ago, really started getting some requests from schools, from nonprofits, all kinds of places to implement financial education into the schools, into classrooms. And so we, at that point, kind of started putting some things together. So credit is really what we're focusing on today. It's a challenging topic to talk about, just because, especially in a group as as big as this one, everyone's starting point's a little different, and the background that you may have, the experiences you may have, may differ. So sometimes there's specific instances that someone may have run into, and I'm happy to talk about those offline too. But we'll kind of today talking kind of general terms of how credit works. We'll start off real simple. What is credit? How does it work? How is it measured? And we'll kind of then get a little more complex as we go of, okay, what is a credit score? How is it weighted? What kind of things influence it? How do you repair it when it gets pretty low? What goes on to a credit report then? How do how do you dispute things that are on your credit report if they're incorrect? So we've got a kind of a litany, a stair-stepped approach here of we'll start off kind of with some basics, but then get a little more complex into the credit portion. We'll also do a little bit on the lending side too. So we're talking about credit, and one of the primary drivers behind having good credit is be able to borrow more money when you need to. And so we'll kind of go through the different loans too, just that way you're aware of them and how they're broken down, kind of in relation to credit. But um, as, as Chastity mentioned, I mean, I think we've got spots in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that too. But Chastity, if you see something pop up, let me know if I'm missing anything. If not, we'll try and get to the things at the end. But so let's see if I can move through here. Okay, that's changing okay on your end. Everyone see kind of what borrowing means? Okay. So really, again, we're starting off kind of from step one here. Credit is basically just the ability to borrow money. So, good credit means you're generally able to. Bad credit, obviously, the opposite. And then when you take on that money, that becomes your debt. What you're paying back. So your student loans, credit cards, things like that. So again, this is kind of our baseline here. We're starting at, credit really enables you to borrow money effectively. And then the reason we're doing that then is to maybe get some loans. So we've got basically the two kinds of loans that we look at a bank: installment loans and revolving loans. So installment would be like your student loans. It's a payment every month. That thing is not going to change. It's got a fixed rate. For the most part. And then the revolving loan are like your credit cards. It's not fixed. You could pay that thing off tomorrow and you don't have a payment the next month. Or you could not have a payment and go buy a new TV and you've got payment there. There's no expiration date on it. You can use it, not use it. Those kind of things are what we consider revolving loans, that they don't have terms on them. Generally, the interest rate's a little higher on those too. So wanted to make sure you're familiar with that. And then we've got secured and unsecured loans. So, secured would be something that we have as collateral. So generally when you buy a car, that car is your collateral for the loan. Because what happens, if you stop making your payments, the bank comes or the credit union comes and repos the car. That's the collateral. If we stop paying on something, the lender is going to take the collateral. So that's what a secured loan is. Typically, the interest rates are a little lower on those. And then unsecured loans are a little higher interest rate. Just personal loans. That's credit cards. That's probably the best example of these things that there's nothing saving the loan here. There's nothing tied to it. It's really just your personal guarantee that's on there. And then the last piece here on, the cost of borrowing. Basically, you're familiar with a credit card or something like that. You've got what you borrowed. That TV cost me $500, but I'm gonna have to pay interest on that. That's the other part of how much I'm borrowing. And then is there some kind of fee with that credit card, some kind of annual fee that's associated with it? That's coming together to make my payment. So generally the cost of borrowing, cost of getting a loan, cost of using your credit to borrow something, those are the factors going in. And then lastly on this piece, I just wanted to cover, the term cosigner, co-borrower kind of gets thrown around very easily, especially when you're starting off in credit. I vividly remember my first day at UTSA walking through the campus and there being tables set up of, sign up for this club, sign up for this fraternity, sorority. And then also tables of sign up for our credit card and get a free t-shirt, sign up for our credit card and get a free piece of pizza. That was all over the place. And so I'm sure they got tons of people to sign up for those credit cards. And so we're going to get into that in a second, but that's a big deal. But a lot of times on not just credit cards, but on loans, the bank, the credit union may say like, oh, you don't qualify just on yourself. Do you have anybody who could co-sign with you? Anybody who could be a co-borrower with you? We always try and make the differentiation or make it clear, like that is a huge ask of somebody. It's not like, hey, can I borrow a pencil or a Scantron for this test? When somebody is co-signing on a loan with you, they're basically taking on that responsibility. If you decide that you're going to stop paying on it, that loan becomes their responsibility. They would then have to pay on it. It goes on to their, we're going to talk about credit reports here in a second, but that loan goes on to their credit report just like it goes on to yours. They're just as much of an owner of that as you are. They're taking on that debt, they're taking on that responsibility. Um, so it's not as simple as sometimes those credit unions or banks make it seem on, yeah, no, just get a cosigner for it, then you'll be fine. Then just when, if you may already be familiar with this, but just in case you're not, it's a big ask to ask somebody to cosign. It's a big ask if somebody's asking you to cosign too. So just be aware that that exists and is out there. Um, and then as we lead into this credit part, the factors that influence many lenders kind of in this space, we've got a credit. Obviously, we know, um, does this person have good credit? And if you think of it in terms of your credit is basically your personal borrowing history. It's your own kind of Bible on who you are as a borrower. Um, do you pay your loans back? Do you pay them on time? Do you pay them late? It's basically telling that story. Sometimes when I'm doing credit for high school classes or middle school classes or something at a very kind of elementary level, we may reference like, hey, remember that kid that you borrowed the pencil from, and like you knew every time you let this kid borrow a pencil, you're never getting that pencil back, right? That's basically a lost pencil. Um, it's the same concept as we've gotten older with credit. It's that reference point of, if I let Jacob borrow a pencil, am I going to get it back? If I lend Jacob money, am I going to get it paid back? And that's basically what we're talking about. So your credit, who you are as a borrower, your capacity, basically, you're going to get asked like, how, what's your income? Could you reasonably pay this loan back? What's your capital, what's your collateral, what's your conditions? We'll get into kind of all those, but kind of those factors there. Those are the main two I wanted to hit on. And we just talked about this, really, that credit is your character as far as a borrower. Who are you when it comes to borrowing money and paying it back? So we'll get into the credit reports here a little bit. So if you're familiar with the credit report, this is going to look pretty familiar to you. If you're not, you can, and we'll get into this in a second, you can actually pull your own credit report at any time. And you may be familiar with the apps, the Credit Karma apps, or some of the others that are out there. There's a website we'll get to here in a second, annualcreditreport.com, that banks actually fund and sponsor. It's a nonprofit that allows you to pull your credit report from the 3 credit reporting agencies, which we'll talk about. And you can actually see itemized on there on your credit report any debts that you have, any your payment history on them. And so this slide goes over what is included on a credit report. It's not all inclusive, but there's a bunch of stuff on there. So your name, your age, we got some serious stuff on there, as far as public record information, your payments. So this kind of is an illustration of like what could be on there, but like your income is not on there. This actually is meant to be a kind of a guessing game here, but since we're not in person, it's a little hard to do. But like your income is an example of something that is not going to be on your credit report. That's something we would remove. That would be kind of a chose wrong on this activity here. But bankruptcies would definitely be on there. If anyone's filed bankruptcy at a time, that's definitely on there. Cell phone plan payments, something that's not on a credit report. That's not something that's relevant. So we're really talking about loans. Debt to income ratio is not listed on the credit report, but that's going to be used to kind of figure out along the way, when you're going through the loan process. Your student loan payments are probably on there. Your student loans would be listed on there as a loan that you'd be paying back. Credit card limits. So the limit itself, it would show you what the balance is, like what's your limit, how much of that credit card have you used up. That would show up on there. Traffic tickets do not. No, if you got a bunch of fines or things like that from driving, that's not listed on there. Savings account balances not listed on your credit report. None of your banking information is. Debit card purchases you make with your debit cards, meaning your money, not a credit card, a debit card, that's not on your credit report either. So, some of these things are listed, some aren't, but so kind of in general, your identifying information, your debts, your public record information, and what we call inquiries. Anytime we've probably all heard this at one point, but like I would get the question all the time, like, if I apply for a loan, does that mean my credit score goes down? Yeah, the answer is yes. It goes down a little bit. But basically we call that an inquiry, and there's different kinds of inquiries. A hard inquiry would be, you went to JCPenney, the person behind the counter asked you, hey, you want to save 10% today and apply for a JCPenney credit card? You say yes. They're going to ask you for a bunch of information. They're going to run your credit to see if you qualify. That's a hard inquiry there. Someone else is checking your credit to see if you qualify. There's inquiries that you're doing yourself where you're gonna go, like we just mentioned, you're gonna go to Credit Karma and you're gonna check. You're gonna go to the credit bureaus and you're gonna check your own credit. That does not bring your credit score down. You yourself checking your own credit does not bring it down there. And then this was a little interesting too. There's such a thing as like inquiries when you're rate shopping, and that applies to when you're shopping for a vehicle and when you're shopping for a home. What actually happens is you have a 30-day window in that time to get as many quotes as you want, right? Because on those kind of big purchases, you're probably going to make sure you're going to get the best deal you can. That's, I know I would do that. I'm shopping for this house. Let me see. That's a huge purchase. I want to make sure my interest rate's as low as I can get it. So I'm going to go to ABC Bank, XYZ Bank, whatever, and see what kind of quotes I can get. If you think about it, it's like, oh gosh, every time they're checking my credit score is going down. Not necessarily. If you're doing that in a 30-day window, it counts as one inquiry on your credit report. So that's, again, for the cars and the homes, those kind of big purchases. So those are the kinds of things that are showing up. We've mentioned the credit bureaus a few times already. These are the 3 credit reporting agencies: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. These are the folks who hold all the keys, have all the information. This is where the credit reports are coming from. So you go to a car dealership to buy a car, they're pulling from one of these guys, or all 3, to find out your credit history, your credit score. You go to that JCPenney's and apply for that credit card, they're pulling from these guys. You go to Old Navy, get a credit card, these guys. Every place that you could think of, this is where the information is coming from. So if you think about it, so banks, credit unions, stores, anywhere that's offering credit is reporting to these agencies. And they're saying, Chastity has a loan with us. Every quarter we're reporting out saying she paid on time. She paid on time. She paid on time. They're housing that data so that when Chastity wants to get a loan again, or we'll get into this in a little bit, but wants to get a new cell phone, wants to rent an apartment, all kinds of things that maybe a credit's going to be pulled for. They're going to go to these guys and pull that. So that's really their purpose, is sitting there and collecting the data and reporting out. But if you see any one of these names, that's who they are. That's what they do. It's a little frustrating that they don't really talk to each other. You would think that your credit score would be the same for each of them, and that's not really the case. Sometimes some places, so a little behind the curtain, mom and pop stores that issue credit to report to them. So sometimes maybe those smaller stores, maybe you're only reporting to one. So there's some reasoning behind that, but there's scores are typically pretty consistent across all 3, but sometimes people get confused of like, my score is 750 here, it should be 750 all across the board. So it may be like 732 or 761 the others. So It just depends, but generally it's going to be in that same ballpark. And we'll look at scoring here in a second, so you get a clear picture um, on what that looks like. I saw a question here from Magda. How often are credit reports updated? Depends on the reporting, right? So just as an example, say you have a loan at, maybe you've got a Best Buy credit card or something like that, and uh, you go and you have a balance on it and you work to pay it off, or you pay it off tomorrow. They may not report that until the end of the quarter, really. So here's a good example. We're April 29th today. The quarter ends June 30th. They might not report it till then, or they may report it at the end of the month. So it's kind of good to keep checking back on that, because it depends on when the reporting's being done by the agents, by the vendor, the place you have the loan, in this case Best Buy. It kind of depends on when they're reporting out to Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. So wish there was a rule of thumb of, hey, check every month, at the end of every month, but it just kind of depends there. So talked about kind of credit reports. The Equifax, Experian, TransUnion have the data to produce these credit reports and what's on the credit report. So how does that, how do we get a credit score from that? You've got this report that's basically a report card, right? You got A, B, C, D. Here's all the places we borrowed money. Have we paid it back? Have we paid it back on time? How do we get a score off of that, is the next logical question. So the score then is a number based on the credit, what's on the credit report itself. And really the score is an easy kind of go-to number to say good, bad, in the middle, that kind of thing, rather than let's sort through every report on here and make a decision based on that. The score is kind of a nice, easy, round thing to go to and say, oh, they've got good credit, they've got okay credit, they've got poor credit. So the score is generated based on that, and generally the higher your credit score is, the better. And so we'll kind of look at what that breakdown is. But I mentioned this a little earlier, who uses credit reports and credit scores in that example of like, well, Chastity's gonna, she's paying off this loan, so the next time she could get a loan, or the next time she does one of these things, it becomes important. So if you are, and those of you who have apartments may have experienced this, you're renting an apartment, they're pulling your credit score. Some utility companies may pull the credit score. I got a new cell phone not that long ago, they pulled my credit score. Insurance companies. Employers is one that a lot of people don't think of. So I'll give you an example, some stories here. Obviously, so I work at a bank. They don't give me money here in my office to mess with, but I still, am in a place that houses lots of money. Now you can only imagine like a teller or a banker who actually has cash drawers or access to money. It becomes really important then for the employer to in this case a bank, to say, is this person highly leveraged? Are they in a good spot debt wise? Might that be a risk that we're putting our money in, to say like, hey, somebody who has tons and tons of debt, here's easy access to a bunch of money? That's probably not a good idea. I was in a session, I'll share this with you. This has been several years now, but we had a Border Patrol agent stand up and say, yeah, so the government pulls our credit to do as a Border Patrol agent for that very reason. Here we are, in this case, he was referencing, drugs coming across the border. If you've got somebody with that may be in a tough situation with debt, maybe there's hundreds of thousands of dollars or medical bills or something like that. Might that person be susceptible to a bribe to say, hey, look the other way while these drugs come across? Because they're highly leveraged in a bad debt situation. So not to say that's a be all end all of an employer's decision, but maybe it's a factor. So that's one of the reasons why maybe an employer pulls a credit report. So just kind of interesting there. But just on the credit reports themselves or the credit scoring, it's really kind of a risk-based. They call it risk-based pricing, but some places, depending on the loan you get, the higher your credit score, the better, the lower interest rate you'll pay, or the lower the credit score, the higher interest rate you may have. So there's kind of some risk that's taken into account there. And then generally, I'll get this question a lot at the high schools, actually, but we'll get the, how come? Well, I'm 18 years old, like I don't have any credit. Why is that just as bad sometimes as not having any credit? That's a really good question. I remember thinking the same thing myself at that age of like, hey, I'm responsible person, I get good grades, like why can't this doesn't seem right to me. And they use the term like credit invisibility here, but it kind of goes back to that example I gave at the beginning of lending a pencil, lending a pen when you're in elementary school. If I know that I've never lent this kid a pencil before, I don't know if I'm going to get it back or not. That's the kind of thing that we're dealing with. There's no history. There's nothing for me to go off of in order to assess, is this a good risk or a bad risk? So it just becomes a harder time for creditors to make that assessment, which is why you kind of get the stereotype of, well, having no credit, isn't a great thing. So, but yeah, it kind of gives a list here of some of the ways that maybe you can mitigate that. So you may just have a harder time, getting the credit or getting the loan. And that's kind of where it comes in what we talked about earlier. Some places may say, we'll get a cosigner. Do you have somebody to co-sign? And we've kind of already been through that, but that's the frustration at that point. I think a little later we'll get into, what are some other ways around that, or what could you do to kind of build your credit score, but we'll jump into that in a little bit. So getting back to kind of the basics of how a score comes together. We've kind of been through a few of these, but generally the higher the score, the better. It's kind of used to predict, are you going to be able to pay this back or not? And then we'll look at all the factors here in a second, but the two biggest factors are, do you repay the debts at the time agreed? So do you pay your loans, and do you pay them on time? That's, we'll look at the percentages, but it's almost a third of the percentage is just that. And then we say credit utilization rate, but basically that means, are you make this much money. So there's such a thing called a debt to income ratio, that I make this much money, I should then be able to pay back this amount of loans. How much of that have I already used up? Your credit utilization rate of, am I already pretty much at my max? If I take out another loan for something, I don't know that I'd be able to pay it back every month. Or am I in a pretty good spot? Have I don't really have that many loans. I'm in a good spot as far as if I take another one, I should be able to repay that. So that's something that's looked at. So I showed you this slide too, just to show you, we're going to look at FICO, the FICO credit score. That's kind of the Fair Isaac Corporation. It's the one that's been used historically, the most common. It's most common. But there's a Vantage credit score. There's other credit scores out there that kind of have different scales. Vantage is one that kind of is like a high school report card. Like anything in the 900s is an A, anything in the 800s is B, anything in the 700s is a C. That's kind of how it's looked at. But we're going to concentrate on the FICO score here, and we'll see the scoring pattern. But I just wanted you to know that that's out there. If you see or hear somebody say, I've got a 900 credit score, there's no 900 credit score in FICO. That's on the scale in Vantage. So just so you know that there's another one out there that has a scale that's different. Or if you get an app or something that is feeding you a Vantage credit score, just so you know the scale there may be a little different too. But this pie chart kind of represents the breakdown of how things are weighted to come up with a credit score. So I told you in the last slide, or 2 slides ago, whether you repay your debts and pay them on time is one of the huge ones. Well, you can see payment history right up here, 35%. More than a third of your credit score is generated by, did you pay your loan and did you pay it on time? That's it. I mean, we think that this is kind of super complicated, but the backbone of this whole thing, the whole baseline is payment history. Did you pay the loan? Did you pay it on time? And a lot of times people get tripped up with like, they didn't send me the bill. It went to my old address. I never got it, so I guess I don't have to pay it. That kind of doesn't fly with credit scores. Maybe that flies in high school with a high school teacher of, I didn't get the email, and maybe even in college too. I didn't get the assignment. We had a hailstorm, and the hail destroyed the bill. I don't know. I'm breaching there, but it doesn't fly on the credit side. Basically, they're saying, you borrowed this, so it's your responsibility to either go back to JCPenney, go back to Best Buy, wherever you got that loan. It's your responsibility to be repaying that. Just because you didn't get the bill in the mail, just because it got lost, it doesn't mean anything. So people can get tripped up there. But if we're looking at the basics, payment history, it's huge, 35%. And then that 30% amounts owed, that's the other piece that we talked about. But debt to income ratio. Are you really highly leveraged? Like, I make whatever, $2,000 a month, and I've got a car payment, a credit card payment, my student loans, maybe I've got the Best Buy credit card, and I've got some charges on there. All of a sudden I'm really inching close to getting to 50% of my income is already taken up with these payments, 60% of my income, 70%. I can't take out another loan without really being able to say I don't have enough money monthly to pay these payments. So that's kind of what that amount owed is. It's always, trying to keep those balances low, pay them off. And things are looked at a little different that way. Like your student loans are viewed differently when it comes to amounts owed. Those are looked at, weighted a little differently, and looked at as really investments into yourself as far as credit goes. So just because somebody's graduating with thousands of dollars in debt doesn't necessarily play the same factor in kind of that amounts owed area that a credit card might, or a car payment might. Same could be said for medical bills. We'll get that question pretty often, is, do medical bills go on your credit report? And there are instances where they go on there, but generally speaking, it's like after there's been 180 days of non-payment or delinquency or something like that, then they may start funneling on there. But generally those you don't see. And then these other factors are kind of influence the credit score here, but to a lesser extent. Length of credit history, this is kind of surprising sometimes, 15%. But if you've had a credit card that you had kind of from the time you turned 18, and then all of a sudden now you're 40, you've still got it, you just never canceled it, that may actually be helping you if you're using it in a good way, using it and paying it off, or keeping the balance low. The length of that credit history, you've had that for a long time, probably helping you a little bit. Your credit mix, we looked at that in the very first part of the slide. You've got, maybe you got a credit card, you've got some installments and the revolving loans that we looked at. That's what that's talking about, the credit mix. You got, your car loan, maybe you have a credit card. It's good to, maybe have a little bit of mix, and not necessarily like, oh geez, this person has 15 credit cards. Like that's not a good credit mix. And then new credit being 10% there, that's kind of the inquiry piece that we talked about before. Have I gone to every store in the mall and applied for credit? Ooh, that's not helping me. So that's kind of the breakdown. And then we've all this time been kind of skirting around the credit score part, but this is really the breakdown of what that looks like. So 800 to 850, top of the line, like, exceptional credit score. Sometimes I get the question like, have you ever seen somebody with that high of a credit score? Um, have before, believe it or not, with like an 840 or something. It's rare, but we'll see them. And then you kind of go from there. You know, the scoring ranges. Um, I mentioned before, so that Vantage, this is the FICO credit score. That Vantage credit score that we looked at or mentioned before, that one goes all the way up to 990. That credit score goes all the way up to 990. That's why I was mentioning to you, if you hear somebody say, I've got a 950 credit score, or somebody tells you like, hey, you've got a 750 credit score, that's very good on the FICO scale, but it's probably behooves you to verify like which credit score or are you using Vantage or using FICO, because that's a different range on Vantage. The 700 would probably be in the good section as compared to the very good section. So that's the whole reason why we mentioned that, of just verifying which credit score they're going off of. I mentioned this before too, but all of us have the right for free credit reports. Many of you may use the Credit Karma app. That's fantastic. There is such a thing. I've got it highlighted down here. This annualcreditreport.com. That's different than, I don't see their commercials very much anymore, but there used to be the guys dancing around. The freecreditreport.com. This is different than that. This is actually the one that I was telling you that the banks fund, that annualcreditreport.com. And all of us as consumers can pull our full credit report showing like the payment history breakdown, all of that from each of the credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. We can pull from each of them once per year through annualcreditreport.com. So you could pull them all today if you wanted, or you could pull Equifax today, Experian in July, and TransUnion in January, and get a pretty good rounded look at what your credit looks like, from all those. But just so you know, that's out there. It's your right to do that. So staying on top of what the credit reports look like. We always try and put this disclaimer out there of, I feel like I see them more and more, but like I'll see signs at stoplights or on the side of the road of like, credit repair, we fix your credits, or that kind of stuff. Be careful for those kind of things. Be careful for kind of imposters, like this says. No one can just remove something off of your credit if someone's saying that to you. It takes work to kind of repair the credit. There's go to trusted sources when you're dealing with stuff like this. It's important stuff. So if you go to your bank or your credit union and ask about kind of credit repair agencies, many times we have relationships with, like, we've got one with the financial empowerment centers here in San Antonio. There's two of them, and that's really one of the main things they do, is working with folks on repairing credit, building credit. There's reputable places out there that do that kind of stuff. So just be cognizant of that. There's unfortunately folks out there that are try and take advantage. So or say that they're going to charge you to do this or that, or get but the big one is, they're going to charge you to get a credit report for you. It's like, we just spent the last 15 minutes talking about how you can pull your own credit report for free. So that's a big red flag there. Let's see. So sections of the credit report, we kind of already hit this too, of the parts of the credit report that's on there. Getting your credit scores themselves. I didn't give you the websites, but I have them here for like the FICO's website, Vantage's credit score website. The one thing I was going to mention to you with the annualcreditreport.com is it gives you the detailed version of that credit report, but it doesn't give you the credit score. So that's where the FICO and the Vantage kind of come in. If you're looking for that, and again, maybe you're just using Credit Karma for the actual number and the kind of, not the detailed breakdown, but a partial breakdown. But if you wanted a full, complete look, you can grab the full credit report from annualcreditreport.com. You go to the scores from the Vantage or FICO websites. So I kind of hit on this already too, the medical debt portion of it. I mentioned that 180 days. So just hit on that. But the repairing and the kind of improving your credit, there's all kinds of steps to take, and it's a lot of hard work. But if you're going down that path, kind of the first step is pulling those credit reports. What exists on there? What's some low-hanging fruit that we mentioned payment history, right? Being 35%, paying a bill and paying it on time, paying it off. There's kind of step one. Where's the low-hanging fruit? What could we get paid off right away? And a lot of times those credit repair agencies, that's what they're looking to do, the first step. Like, what kinds of things could we either negotiate down to pay off, or just automatically, you got this $100 charge from AT&T for not returning a cable box. Let's pay that out, and those are the kind of steps. So kind of first step is getting those credit reports, and kind of paying off the things that are easy to. But you also want to check for errors. Sometimes these places will make errors, especially in cases with family, of like maybe it's a father and a son, it's a junior and a senior, it's the same name, social security numbers are similar. There's kind of instances like that where mistakes could be made. So making sure that what's on there is accurate. We talked about the paying the bills and paying them on time. Keeping that debt level low. Sometimes if we're looking to build the credit, we talked about the cosigner piece, which has its own double-edged sword, but sometimes there's, the smaller, the mom and pop stores, things like that, where we could get a line of credit or a credit card to kind of help establish or build. I know this has been a long time, but my wife actually got a college credit card when she was in college, and the limit on it was very low. It was like $250. So she couldn't spend more than $250. So she couldn't get into too much trouble with it. But it was a tool that she could use to, I'm going to buy a pizza and pay it off. I'm going to use it for gas and I'm going to pay it off at the end of the month. It's a tool that she could use. Again, if we're talking about 35% of the credit score is paying the bill and paying it on time, those kind of low balance credit cards, even if the interest rate is high, if you're using it and paying it off, if that's the strategy just to establish or rebuild credit, that could be a strategy to take. So there's kind of those pieces there. Sometimes if if this is when you're trying to get into an apartment or something, or there's really a need to show like, hey, I do pay. Maybe I don't have the credit history, but I've got all this other history that's out there of paying bills on time. Sometimes that may be helpful in some cases of showing like, here's my rental history. Here's I pay my child care every month. Here's my phone bill, my electric bill, my gas bill, internet bill, all kinds of bills that I have. That these are bills that aren't on the credit report. Remember we talked about it's really just loans that are on the credit report, not necessarily your monthly bills. But these could be kind of alternative ways to show a lender, to show an apartment complex, to show somebody like, hey, I've got a history of paying and paying on time. Maybe I don't have the credit history to show that, but I've got this other history to show. So that could be something that's used too. And we talked about a little bit about building the credit history. Talked about that, maybe getting a low balance credit card. They also have secured credit cards. So what that looks like is, maybe I've got the $500 of cash or something. I could use that. We talked about collateral earlier. We could use the $500 as collateral. The bank could put that in a savings account and put a hold on it, and then give me a credit card of a $500 limit. So if I max it out and leave town, they've still got my $500 cash here that's collateral. But the benefit for me is now I've got a tool to build credit. I can use my card and pay it off, and that's establishing that payment history. So there's all kinds of things like that. We mentioned cosigner on here. Credit card, those small dollar credit cards. They mentioned like stores or gas stations. or making kind of a large down payment to help negotiate the rate. There's all kinds of things like that. We've been hitting on this maintaining credit piece for most of our time together here, but paying your bills and paying them on time, that's the biggest piece, and keeping the debt levels low. That's really how you're maintaining the score. Don't apply for credit if you don't need it. It's that's just increasing your debt levels. The taxes and child support piece on there becomes important, because if those aren't paid, those could affect the credit report. That could always bleed in. And then checking your credit reports regularly for disputes. If we talked about, you can pull once a year. You've got the Credit Karma app. There's lots of avenues now to just be able to pull your credit report and make sure that the things on there are correct, and that way you're not inadvertently, getting into trouble. It's not, something happening that's not your fault, kind of thing. And then I mentioned this earlier too. There's all kind. If you need help, if there's something that's needed, there are agencies out there. Like I mentioned, the financial empowerment centers. There's nonprofit organizations out there that's what they do. You don't need to call the sign that you see at the stoplight. There's nonprofit entities out there that do a lot of the debt repair, credit repair. So again, we kind of touched on this too. Check for the reputable companies. There's businesses out there that are not so reputable, so just watch out for them. We've got kind of these use caution for taking, if someone's telling you to, well, let's take out another loan to pay off this loan, like that's a red flag. It doesn't really, it's not addressing the underlying cause of the debt. It's paying off what we've already owe. It's not taking on more debt to pay off. I was thinking about my brother. He was at Texas State going to school, and I got a call from him one day that he was saying, do you guys do credit cards? I think I need a credit card. It's like, well, yeah, we do, but what do you need a credit card for? And he said, well, I'm having trouble paying my bills. I think I need a credit card to help pay my bills. And I was like, oh, that's the exact opposite reason you get a credit card. If your debt is so high that you can't handle the bills, that's the opposite reason. There's no reason to take on more debt. But yeah, and then your creditors, in this case, the people you borrowed money from, they do sometimes what are called settlements, or they may work with you on the term of the loan if you're having trouble. It's been really prevalent this year with COVID in 2020 of, lenders, creditors, really working with folks to say, well, let's extend the term, let's defer payments. I've got report after report of us doing that here. I always tell people, like, look, the bank doesn't want to repossess something. We're not in the business of repossessing things. That's extra cost. Really, we want the loans to be paid back. So it's in a lender's best interest to work with the borrower to kind of get them in a situation where they can be in a repayment situation, because that's really ultimately what the lender wants. And I mentioned the scams that were out there. So just be careful if you're trying to repair. That some of that exists. And I always like to mention too, protecting your credit history. That you could actually put a fraud alert or a freeze on your credit. That exists. And you could do that with a small child too. Like, they get a social security number. That's what's tied to your credit. You could actually put a freeze on your child's credit, and that way they're not a victim of child identity theft or using the child's social security number to get loans. Same thing for elderly parents or grandparents, that you could actually freeze their credit so that no loans are taking out in their name, and prevent against elder fraud. So I always like to mention that too, that those are done directly through the credit bureaus. So I think, I know I'm right up against time. I thought I'd leave some time for questions, but Chassie, I'll turn it back over to you. If we've got a couple questions, I'm happy to address, and also happy to, if you want to reach out offline, we can absolutely do that too.
Does anyone have any questions at this time? Mr. Jacob has provided us with a whole lot of good information, a whole plethora of things, a few things that are new to me, and a whole lot of things that I was like, oh, yeah, that great reminders. Does anyone have any questions? You're welcome to unmute yourself and simply ask.
I see one here on, could a high school student start building credit? So typically you have to be 18 years old to get a credit card, or be a contract be legal. Like a lender can't make a contract with a minor. So typically, yeah, they have to be 18 years old to enter into some kind of lending contract.
That is a great question. I actually have one that goes a little further than that. So if someone is 16 years of age or older, in the past, wasn't there one where a parent could do some type of program that's for minors? I grew up with a credit union. My mother had worked as a teller in a credit union, and she had established actual bank accounts for us at a young age. And it's funny because all three of us have two younger siblings. All three of us have maintained those accounts with the original account numbers. So is there programs that are connected to the parents that they could start something young, or are they just like programs for children, savings programs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's good. You start them young, get the customer in there early. But yeah, so I'll make the differentiation here between, so those checking accounts, those savings accounts, money market accounts, certificates of deposit, CDs. There can be minors on those with a parent, guardian, legal adult, on there as well. On the credit side, there, you get into some, well, maybe there's some community credit union that might have like a small credit card that the parent has, but the minor's on there, and so it's helping the minor kind of build credit. Or maybe the 16-year-old is on the parent gets them a car, and they're on the car loan with the parent, so it's reporting to their, but generally speaking, yeah, it goes back to the whole, a lender can't hold a minor responsible if something goes bad on a loan. There's no recourse there. I saw a question here: should you have more than one bank account? Really, I mean, it depends on what's important to you. Some people, it's like, hey, I got my operating account here. It's what I pay my bills out of. And that's what I do. Some people have different accounts for different things. Like, this is my pay my bills account. This is my emergency account. This is my vacation account. This is my home repair account. So you can have multiple accounts at a bank. You can have different accounts at different banks. So really no limit to that.
Jacob, we do have one more question as well. Actually, we have a second one. Miss Magda, would you like to ask your question to Jacob, Mr. Jacob?
Oh, sure. Hi, Jacob. This is Ms. Garza. I'm with the Financial Aid Office here at Alamo at Northeast Lakeview. And I just wanted to make sure our students read their credit card terms, because I know some credit cards, it's been a while since I've actually applied for a credit card, but I do know that some credit cards offer promotions where it's a certain amount of time, they're certain percentage, and sometimes after a year it'll go to a different percentage. Or if you pay out, I'll give one example. Let's say you want to make something at Home Depot, and those companies or Lowe's or something, they'll give you a credit card, their credit card, but it'll be for a certain amount of time, maybe no interest. And then as soon as that payment, if you haven't finished it within the terms that they're asking, let's say maybe 12 months, I mean, that interest rate is really high. So am I wrong?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We definitely want to be aware, specifically with credit cards, because they're one of the loans that we talked about that's unsecured, it's revolving, so it falls into both those categories of it's going to have a high interest rate. And you're exactly right that a lot of them kind of get you in the door, loop you in with, well, it's going to be 0% interest and no payments for 6 months, or no payments for a year and 0% for a year. which is great. If you can utilize that deal to your advantage, all the better. I've actually done that. My wife and I, when we first got married, we didn't have anything. It was like, well, we need a refrigerator, we need a microwave, we need all this stuff. And we went to Sears, and it was, okay, well, we've got 0% interest for a year and 0 payments for a year. And but we were very disciplined with, okay, I don't even remember what the number was, $2,000, whatever it was. But we divided that out by 12, and every month I went to Sears and made that payment. It was divided by 12 for 0 interest. So by the time the 12th month hit, we were all saddled up, all paid off. And we got to take advantage of that. We didn't pay any interest on any of that stuff. But I've been on the other side of that too, where, this 0% interest for 6 months or a year, and all of a sudden, the year's there and you haven't done anything. And guess what? They don't just start adding interest at that point. Sometimes it's back interest. They add the interest for the whole year onto that card. And so you really have to be disciplined with that stuff and read the terms of the credit card, because that can really get you into a hole and put you in a tough spot.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob. I do have one last question. I just want to make a comment before I give the last question. You're absolutely right with that particular type of card that Ms. Garza was asking about. That also includes what they call like consumer credit cards, right? Which are like furniture stores, the department stores. Typically, they all typically do that, but the department stores and the furniture places and the appliance places, or like Lowe's or Home Depot, are the most common ones that you'll see, so they can lure you in. So you do have to be disciplined. I have a card with Ashley's Furniture, and if you're wanting to decorate your home, do it on a dime, then yes, that's something that you have to be very disciplined about. We have one last question, and it goes back to the original question that we had about minors and credit cards. A student named Samara was asking, would the credit account connect to the savings account, or like a checking account with the parent or minor, or both?
Yeah, sometimes you can set that up, and that's kind of goes back to what we talked about with the secured credit card. That was one of the ways to build credit, and that's exactly what you're talking about there, where that credit card could be supported by a savings account, or a CD or a money market or something like that has cash in it, and that's the collateral for the card. That's a good example of those secured credit cards there. It's a good way to build credit.
Awesome. Well, we are going, it is 4:06, and I do want to be mindful of people's time. We have Ms. Magda Garza here. She's going to end this with an announcement that we have about an upcoming event. Ms. Garza?
Oh, just forgot to unmute myself. One moment. Okay. Hi, everybody. So this Saturday, we will be having something called the FAFSA Saturday. It's where we help students from all Alamo colleges and even our students from the high school. So if you want to spread the word for FAFSA Saturday, and we help our students complete their FAFSAs for this coming fall. And if you know of anyone who has not completed their FAFSA and is enrolled for this spring semester, we'll be happy to help them with their FAFSA as well. Our phone number is the 210-212-5266. And I will ask Miss Chastity to maybe put that flyer on somewhere. I don't have the flyer here with me at the moment, but I'll see if I'll send it to Miss Chastity, and then we'll have that forwarded to everyone. It is this Saturday from 9 to 1, and we'll be happy to help you with your FAFSA. Thank you.
All right, as we close this out, Ms. Peggy Chavez, she's going to end with some closing remarks.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for attending. We hope that the information that was shared with by our speaker, Mr. Jacob Cavazos, we hope that it was very informative and that you would be able to apply some of these techniques in managing your own personal finances. So I did drop in the chat a little bit earlier. Please continue to connect with us. The financial literacy program does have a portal on Alamo Experience, and so please connect with us so that you can stay updated on all of our events throughout the semester and throughout the school year. And